For years, eyewitnesses have been seeing mysterious upright canine creatures that they cannot describe, and has left many mystery into the world. It is unknown what lurks around into these creatures, but with sketches, drawings, and thousands of accounts, the mystery is. Join us as we talk about Dogman, the most terrifying cryptid in the world.
My next guest at this time, ladies and gentlemen, he's a big celebrity, a big man in the field. You probably recognize his videos from the Dogman Creatures Are Real to his own personal blog. We're talking about Scott Carpenter, one of the biggest YouTube videos of Dogman content to this day, one of the most successful Dogman videos to this day. Over 5 years ago, that video was uploaded to YouTube, and 5 years later, over 100,000 views later, it's still going strong. And folks, it's Scott Carpenter, it's all him, one of the greatest researchers, I believe, in the Dogman world, Scott Carpenter himself. Scott, welcome to the 10 Tales of Dogman. It's great to have you on, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Well, you're welcome, and it's great to be on. That introduction, my head's swollen. I think I'll get my wife to come in here and bring me down a notch or two.
All in good faith, Scott. All in good faith.
Good deal.
But thank you for doing what you do in this field. It's great to have you on.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to come on.
You know, Scott, there's no question, there's no doubt, there's so many people who ask about your work and what you do in the groups that I moderate. And, by all means, one of the greatest researchers, I believe, in Dogman research. You've really opened a lot of worms, a lot of good can of worms on the field. So that's a good accomplishment to feel proud of, too, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Scott, I could ask exactly the brief bio, which I will, but Scott, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit to the viewers out there who are not familiar with Scott Carpenter.
Well, I was, and still am, I started off this in Bigfoot research, and been doing that since 2009, and I became a Dogman researcher, I guess, by accident. And, pretty much most of my Dogman footage, all of it, has been gotten while trying to research Bigfoot. So it's, I guess by default, I'm an accidental Dogman researcher. And it's kind of like if you go out in the field and research one, you're going to find the other.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, but I got into this in 2009. A Bigfoot encounter got me started. And then a couple of years later, I captured footage of a Dogman on the back trail camera. And at that time, we had the Sasquatch genome study going on, and that was when Dogman wasn't very popular. In other words, we don't talk about Dogman, we're having a hard enough time with the DNA research. And so when I got that video and some other footage, the team for the Sasquatch genome studies, let's just not do anything with this yet, because, everybody will think, oh God, you're trying to prove that Bigfoot exists using DNA, and now you come up with this creature called Dogman. So, I kind of sat on the footage for a little bit, and then when things eased up, I went ahead and released the footage. And so that's kind of how I got into this. I've applied, like you said, I've applied a more spiritual, I'm a Christian, and I come through my research through that worldview. And so, I've applied my knowledge of that to the Dogman research and its origins, and along with these other cryptids. Because an interesting thing usually happens if you're a Dogman researcher, then Bigfoot and other cryptids show up. And same thing if you're a Bigfoot researcher. If you do it long enough, these other cryptids will show up. It's just the nature of the research. And there's a link, there's some relationship to all these different things. And, that's where, like you say, it gets interesting, and you get to go down a bunch of rabbit holes when you start, when you get into the research, because, Dogman leads to orbs lead to spirits, spirits lead to, and so forth and so on. So, it's not, there's no, this research is not in a vacuum, and it's real hard to say Dogman research, Bigfoot research, or whatever, Goatman, or other cryptid research, or even UFOs. Even the UFO community has begrudgingly had to admit that there have been some links to the whole deal. There's been Bigfoot spotted at UFO sightings. There's been Bigfoot spotted on UFOs. There's been Dogman sighted in and around UFOs, or strange lights in the woods, and then the Dogmen show up. That sort of deal. So, it's a mixed bag of things going on out in the woods.
It's interesting because when I first took a look at your videos and when I first took a look at who Scott Carpenter was, because the big topic at the time when I first started getting into the subject was Linda Godfrey, and then while in time of the 2010s, we started to transition into Dogman encounters and various other researchers who are performing in the Dogman art, because this has become a hot topic in the field. Mm-hmm. It's such a strong creature, if anything, in the top 5 cryptid search. And one of the things that fascinate me about this creature is the fact that it resembles that of a werewolf. Now, I want to ask you this, Scott, because you did mention that you were, of course, from the Christian faith, and God bless, too, because I am myself. And, I am, when I hear about this creature, it is a very scary thought. It is. How was it for you when you were in the bush, as we call it? And how was it when you first came across one of these things? Your initial reaction, like, how did you feel? Because you knew that at this point you weren't dealing with a Sasquatch. You were dealing with something else, I believe.
Yeah. Well, my first encounter, of course, was I didn't realize anything was behind me. It was captured on my back trail camera. I put a camera on my shoulder and filmed behind me. And so that initial capture, I didn't really even know I got it. I mean, I had a funny feeling, but really didn't know anything was going on until I reviewed the video. And of course, that freaked me out. But my research partner, David Pilates, I called him, told him about that. And he, even though we weren't going to go public with it yet, he was a big gun ho. We need to let's see if we could get some DNA. Let's see what we can do. And so I was stupid enough to go back in the same area the next week with bacon and all kinds of goodies. And I had an encounter with one where we made eye contact. And it was, I don't know, it was shocking. It was odd. It was terrifying. I mean, there were several things that go through your head, because this thing jumps up on the side of this tree, because the foliage is about probably head high. I'm 6'3", and it's just about my head level. So obviously this creature was probably about my height. And I noticed the moment when he jumps up on the tree, and he literally jumps up on the tree and sticks his claws in, and then leans out backwards and looks over his right shoulder, actually, and is looking at me. And I'm staring at this thing, and it's looking at me. And you know how you and I, or you look at another human being, or even I've even made eye contact with a Bigfoot before, and there's a soul there. There's a consciousness. There's it's a person. Well, when this Dogman was looking at me, there was nothing there. I mean, this was, I don't know how other people have experienced it, but for me, it was like it was looking straight through me. It almost like it was looking like I wasn't there to it. You know what I'm saying? I was just, but I didn't get anything back from this thing. Like, there was no emotion, there was there was nothing there. It was just blank, dark, black eyes looking at me. And it was even though it never really made any threatening moves toward me, it just that presence, it just scared the crap out of me. I don't know how else to say it. I've heard other people say the same thing. They don't do anything, but they're just their appearance, their presence, or the lack thereof of anything from them. It's very scary. It makes you feel very uncomfortable. So yeah, it was not. I would really don't want to see another one, to be honest with you. That's how, disturbing, I guess is the best word it is to see one, because there is something. I mean, I don't want to word to you. I guess we could say demonic, even though it didn't do anything, you just feel some sort of evil from it, or at least I did. So it was it was malevolent for sure, and it didn't have you just didn't feel good vibes from it. I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, you know what? I mean, I think we can all say for the best that 90% of the encounters that people face are, of course, it is, an uncomfortable situation. People don't necessarily know how to react to such a creature, and the fact of the matter is that this is a creature that is easily 10 times more stronger than yourself, that it is a very intimidating situation, and the evil thing is something I've heard constantly, and I've interviewed people, including one of my friends, who've mentioned how it is an evil, he believes it's an evil creature. And it's hard for people who are very open-minded to kind of think of it as a source that this is a creature that possesses an evil presence, because you got people who go out and they want to try to find this thing. And in the words of Vic Cundiff and many of the words that come from various eyewitnesses like yourself, I don't encourage nobody to go out and try to find one of these things or play with one of these things, because it's a very scary situation. And for you, you mentioned about the whole thing with the evil. Like, do you believe that these are creatures of supernatural descent?
Yes, I believe personally, through my experience, research, and some of the genetics, that these things are some sort of genetic manipulation. That they are a hybrid of some sort, probably. If you want to say Nephilim, you could say that they probably got human DNA, canine DNA, and maybe even some fallen angel DNA, and they're kind of a hodgepodge of genetics to get this creature. So that's my personal belief. And there's different types. I mean, there's what they call the pig nose one with a flat nose. There's the German Shepherd looking one. There's the more traditional werewolf looking one. There's one that looks like it's a dog standing on 2 feet that has human arms, while there's others that actually look more like they have a human like upper torso, but with a dog head, but with more regular looking legs. So there's like a mixed bag. And so, I think there's some sort of genetic manipulation. It could be, several thousand years old. And, it's just, and then they've crossbred, or there could be even newer offshoots of it. Who knows? I think it's just a mixed bag, but I think it's some sort of demonic, fallen angel created creature that's its origin.
And you know what, and that's something that for a lot of folks out there, because we ourselves are still trying to figure out what these things are, as well as Sasquatch. There's no question. In our society now, and I don't even think it's going to happen in my generation either, we will have the official truth on these creatures. Which, unfortunately, because this is why we do the thing, and thanks to advanced technology, thanks to social media, we've had this outlet to help bring it out of what this creature is. Now, with Dogman, do you believe that these things, could that be the work of, as you mentioned, a fallen angel? Do you think that these creatures, like familiar to that of Mothman, are here to warn us about something, or do you think they're here just for solely of the facts of the earth of being a fallen angel, as you mentioned?
I don't know. You probably don't think this is a whacked out theory. Uh, I think they're here and they're being pre-positioned for something in the future. What? I don't know. I don't think. I guess their presence warns us. I mean, if you're a Christian, the Bible speaks about in the last days it will be as the days of Noah. Well, when you really study the days of Noah and look at the Genesis 6 account, there were Nephilim in the land, and all flesh was corrupt. In other words, the fallen angels were corrupting the entire creation, right? So they were making, they were copulating with animals, they were crossing animals, they were mixing everything. So, as a sign, the Dogman itself is a sign, I think, of we're getting close to what, the biblical last days. So in that respect, yes, I think they are bringing a message. And then their creation, of course, I think is, it's to corrupt the genome. I think could be some nefarious things going on. I mean, I don't know, right. There seems to be, if you talk to any researcher, there seems to be an unspoken set of rules that they must follow. Except for rare occasions, I have not heard of them attacking anyone. Now they'll scare, someone really badly, but very rarely do they interact other than scare the person and take off. And so, there seems to be this wall of separation that they can't, come any farther. I mean, I had a dog man 4 feet behind me. It could have jumped me and killed me instantly. There's no doubt. But it didn't. Why? What restrained it? And other people, I mean, have had similar things. They encounter a dog man. It's very scary. It does its thing, but at the end of the day, it lets them go. Mothman, the same thing. Bigfoot, the same thing. Several of these other creatures, they all, they see there's this unwritten rule, there's a set of rules they have to follow. So I guess that's a long-winded way to say, yeah, I think they're giving us a message. I think they're being pre-positioned for some sort of end times thing. The Bible says that man's hearts will fail for what's coming upon the earth. And from a biblical standpoint, when Satan and the angels fell, a third of the angels fell. So he's got in a war situation, Satan's got a disadvantage. There's 2/3 good, there's 1/3 his bad. So he's got to up the ante. He's got to create creatures, on his side to try to get the balance of power back up. And that could be another reason. Those are my theories about what's going on with them.
And you know what? Those theories, they stand out because they're very interesting, and it's an interesting perspective. I've heard that religious speak of, and of course for me, myself, and my religion as well, I've heard that speak of dozens of times in the groups. And a lot of people, they don't want to hear that type of stuff because of the fact that it is a very, a whacked out theory, but it is also a theory that could be possible true. And that's something right there that I think a lot of people, I'm not one to judge someone's theory because of the fact that it might sound a little out of basis or bias with some people. It's the fact that it could be the possibility. There's a lot of things in this world that's pretty unexplained and a lot of happening lately that could lead to this whole theory. And for a lot of us, it's a scary thought, but, at the same time, it's important that we keep our heads up and realize that if it happens, it happens. We can't do nothing to stop it. And that's the honest truth. I don't like to kind of categorize it as that, but I mean, hey, I don't think we all wanted to do that in the first place with this subject. And you did mention, of course, about the whole Dogman, you don't believe of the attacks, so you've probably heard of LBL dozens, if not millions of times. Do you have any perspective on that?
I've listened to 2 or 3 of the stories, and I'm not going to discount that. I mean, that is a possibility that they would attack or could attack. As a general rule, the rules are they don't touch people, but they could break the rules, or for whatever reason, the rules could be suspended, or they could have one go rogue. I mean, I hate to relate this back to Bigfoot, but there have been cases. 98% of the time, there's nothing, nothing goes on with a Bigfoot other than someone sees it and they run the other direction. It runs the other direction. But there are cases where there is violence, where there is, stuff, really bad things, or even people getting killed. So I don't, with Land Between the Lakes and some other stories, though, there's really no proof. I'm not, I don't really think you can say 100%, no, those stories aren't true. Because there could be an outlier, there could be 1 or 2 that, actually happen.
Absolutely. And, that's my perspective with it too, because when I first started getting into the field myself, I heard about the LBL story no less than about a good year and a half ago. So this was when I was more knowledgeable on it, and it just, there is a possibility that it could happen. But the fact of the matter is that there's very little of the people who were the players that were around for this, that it's hard to say. But I do believe that they could do that, and there's a possibility that they do break the rules, that they could do something that would be very outlandish and unheard of. But also, too, and this leads into my next question, at least. Do you believe that these creatures could be tamed as apex predators of the animal kingdom, or do you think that they are unstoppable to capture and harnessed with?
I think, except in rare cases, they're probably you can't capture them. I mean, if there's a supernatural component to them, and I think there is, and no one's captured one that we know of. That we know that some have been shot at or shot, but all the stories I've heard is that the shooting of them has no effect. So and inevitably with Dogman, if you're researching it, I mean, the progression is you start off researching Dogman, you think it's a physical creature, its origins are some sort of upright canine. And then that leads into, well, all of a sudden some really weird stuff. The woo starts happening, and orbs show up, or this Dogman materializes somewhere and then dematerializes, or he does something super. There's starts this supernatural stuff starts to happen, and so that's always the progression. So I, is it an apex predator? Probably. It probably eats what it wants to, and I think when it's it has to eat, and we know it's physical. It leaves evidence. It leaves footprints when it's when it's in this dimension, if you want to go there. You know, but I don't think you could capture it. I don't think you could tame it. That's just my personal opinion.
And that's a good analogy on it as well. Now we mentioned the woo. Now, one of the big things about your work is, of course, the woo and the whole theory behind it,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of people lately have been getting into, probably thanks to several researchers and eyewitnesses out there who've mentioned it on Vic's show, or, of course, various other outlets with the supernatural side effect of it, or the being of a dogman itself. Now, I want to ask you a little about the woo. For people out there who are not familiar with the woo, can you give us a little bit of a description of what the woo is and what it's about?
Yeah. Well, inevitably, you get into encounters that have supernatural components, and that's what the woo is. In other words, and most researchers, even those who see a woo, so to speak, or see something supernatural, will actually ignore it or not report on it because they'll think it makes them look crazy, or their personal belief is this is some sort of corporal natural creature. So even though I saw it dematerialize or materialize, or I saw it accompanied by an orb, or I saw some impish creature on its shoulder that makes no sense and we can't explain, I'll leave that out of my story. And so the woo is basically is when the supernatural or the unexplained starts happening around the phenomenon. And and be honest, I mean, you can ask Linda Godfrey. She even talks about the woo and the trouble she had even getting it. How electronics would miraculously break or not be able to capture it on film, and all kinds of other things. Tracks, appearing and disappearing. It looks like the creature just appears, leaves tracks, and then the tracks are gone in the middle of a field. That sort of thing. So, that's the woo part of this whole phenomenon. And like I said, a lot of people don't want to hear it. It upsets them. It, makes them mad. Of course, they call me and everybody else that goes there a loon. And, oh, you're just crazy. But the problem, like I said, the problem is if you do this long enough and you're serious about it and you're doing serious research, you're whether you want to or not, you're going to run into these phenomenon you cannot explain. So you can do two things with them. You can admit they're happening, and describe them, or you can ignore them. And so, that's kind of, you have those two camps. One camp ignores it, and one camp, kind of more open-minded, just accepts, okay, we've got something that's a little bit more than natural going on, so supernatural. There's some odd things happening. Let's look into this. What's causing this, or why is this accompanying the Dogman phenomenon?
That's a good, interesting put on it too, with the woo and whatnot. Because, and that's another thing too. A lot of people, like I myself, I've only been in this field for quite a while. But like you've mentioned, you're deeping into it long enough, you will begin to discover the attributes of the supernatural side of it. And of course, everybody, is 50-50 with it. They could either agree to disagree with it. However, it's something that you can't just escape, because it's always going to be brought up, it's always going to be mentioned, it's always going to be a factor in these creatures, which is why, even though that I will admit that I kind of downsize a little bit of the supernatural theory because of the fact that we don't have enough evidence to showcase a flesh and blood creature, but getting into the theory of paranormal and the supernatural side of it, that's also a possibility. And I've been a little bit more respectful with it. I've been opening up more to it. Clearly, here I stand with you, interviewing you about it. Now, yeah. I want to ask you about the woo. Is the woo, what could it do that a typical flesh and blood Dogman can't do?
Well, and I guess I was remiss. There's one category I forgot to bring up about the woo, and that's the skinwalker. And I know you've the hunt for the Skinwalker Ranch, but and even Linda Godfrey, I refer back to her, and she talks about there's the physical Dogman, what we consider. And then there's this supernatural side, or this skinwalker. And a skinwalker is a human being that shapeshifts into a wolf, through witchcraft and magic. And then there's the actual physical creature. And though one may kind of look like the other, they're two different things. So that's one part of the woo, is that, this skinwalker legend, and the fact that you've got that, that intermixed with the physical, an actual Dogman, which is a Dogman all the time, and a physical creature. But some of the woo that, what I'm talking about is the ability for the creature to go in, just like a Bigfoot. I mean, I've heard, there have been Dogman that have been invisible. No one can see them. In other words, they go invisible, then they materialize, they do what they do, and they dematerialize. There was a case where a couple watches these mysterious white orbs come out of the sky, go fly around the woods, and settle off into the woods. And then the dog, several dogs, they feel this creepy feeling. It's Shelley Rockwell Martin's who I'm talking about in her story, and and then they run into the house, and these Dogmen show up. So where did they come from? That's the woo, part of it. And like I said, the tracks, you'll have an open field, a muddy field. Right in the middle of the field, these canine-like dog prints will start. They'll carry on for 200 or 300 yards, and then they'll just disappear. And there's no explanation. There's nowhere to go. It's in the middle of an open field. There's no tracks to be found. That's the woo. In other words, you have something that natural explanation can't explain. Being shot. I mean, I've heard more than one story of these things being shot point blank range, and the creature not dying, not bleeding. I mean, in the Skinwalker book, there's this, this abnormally large wolf that in the very first day that they're on this ranch, and it grabs a calf by the nose and tries to pull the calf through a fence, and the farmer shoots it with I believe it's a 44 or 357, and the thing doesn't even flinch. There's no blood, there's no nothing. He goes in the house, gets a 30-06, and blows a huge chunk out of it, but still no blood. And the thing finally lets go of the calf and walks off. And so they've got this, and when they go over and look at the piece of flesh, it's already begun to rot as if it's 4 or 5 days old. So that's the and that had multiple witnesses. That's that's a Combe Keller and book. So this is not something that's just made up or thrown out there. So that's the woo. I'm trying. That's the woo. Is those unexplained, appearingly supernatural phenomenon that surround the physical and inevitably happen. I mean, that's why I said if you're researching this in your mama's basement and looking at YouTube videos, that's one thing. But if you're in the field and you're actively pursuing these things, you're doing videos and you're doing that sort of research where you're going out and look in the field and getting eyewitness accounts and those sort of things, then you will, trust me, I don't care. I mean, I can 99.9%, you will run into these woo factor occurrences that you've got to deal with.
And that's an interesting fact, too, is that with the supernatural piece of the Dogman, but also, too, this also may allude to even the flesh and blood when it comes to when you fire at one, this thing still goes and keeps moving as if this thing is invulnerable to damage. While a piece of flesh may fall out, but you mentioned a thing about it rotting, looking like it was rotted flesh when this farmer shot a big chunk out of this creature's body. Now, with the woo, these things, you believe, there's no question. I mean, we've basically went through the indestructible or the invulnerability type perk that it carries. What is your take on cloaked or teleportation with these creatures?
Well, as far as cloaking, that would probably be an ability that came from the fallen, fallen angels, because that isn't. If you read the Bible, that is one of the abilities that an angel has is to become invisible and to go interdimensional. Okay, there's two dimensions. There's the spiritual dimension where the angels and God live in, and then there's our dimension, this physical dimension. And if these creatures are a hybrid and have angelic DNA, then in theory, that's Scott's theory, they have some abilities to go between the dimensions and survive in both. And I know, and I go back to the Hunt for the Skinwalker, but there is a scene once the ranch Bigelow buys the ranch and he puts scientists on the ranch. There are some guys overlooking this field, and one of them's got an infrared camera. And in the middle of this field, he sees a hole open up, about 6 foot across. It looks like a long tube. And he sees this creature crawling out of this tube, and it's basically a Dogman. And the hole's about 6 feet off the ground, so the creature jumps down and then runs off, through the field and into the woods, and then the hole just, closes up. And these are two PhDs. Of course, one guy's got a regular camera; he can't see anything. The guy with the infrared's like, it's time to leave now. This thing is in the woods and we're leaving. So that's a story of some sort of portal that opened up that was recorded and two scientists, witnessed. So, that's, and so, that kind of goes, if they are part angelic, I can see that them having that ability.
I never heard of that story up until now, too. That's pretty interesting. Scary.
Yeah, that's in the Hunt for the Skinwalker book.
That's interesting. That's
scary. Look up the page to reference that, but
that's a very scary situation, though, if you think about it. Big creature like that, then it just vanishes like that, and the fact of the matter is that this is caught by two PhDs. That's a very terrifying experience.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your research in the field, in the bush, do you, when you're out there, and now that you know that these creatures exist, has your protection of your own surroundings has increased 10 times more compared to when, back in 2008, when it was all just, the beginning stages, and then up until 2009 with the sighting, and then what were your research, at least, where it all started for you? Like, let's just say, for example, with you, when you, like, pre-Bigfoot, pre-Dogman, your adventures out in the wilderness was probably not as big an increase of safety, unless you still were, but have they increased since your sightings and your research?
Well, if I'm out in certain areas, I usually carry a firearm for sure, where before I wouldn't. I mean, I blogged on this before. This type of research kind of ruins your enjoyment of the woods because you realize what's out there. And but yeah, I mean, I take more precautions. I mean, I'm at this point in my research, I've gone back to just enjoying nature, doing my normal activities, and then I take, I take a camera, put my back, film my back trail. If they show up, they show up. If they don't, they don't. At this point, I personally, there's not, except for getting the footage. There's not a whole lot more we can do. Uh, you know, Really all that's left is a body and DNA. But yeah, I'm more cautious. I what they call pray up before I go and ask for protection, and ask for my family's protection. And I don't go alone anymore. I used to go alone a lot, and it's kind of a dual-edged sword. If you're alone, a lot more will happen. But then I personally feel like you put yourself at risk more alone, because I don't know what these things are capable of or what the next one's going to do. And so uh, when I'm in the field, I'm usually now with someone else, which at times, it does reduce your chances of having some sort of encounter or some sort of, something happening. But yeah, I mean, another long-winded answer to say, yeah, I take precautions now, and I'm more aware of my surroundings. I guess this is a good point to say this. It appears to me that both Bigfoot and Dogman, for me, if you seek them out, that's an invitation. You open yourself up to the phenomenon. In other words, because people ask, well, how did you just get lucky or whatever? And I found other researchers. It's another one of these rules. By seeking these things out, you are passively giving them permission to involve themselves with you and in your life. And that's the law. That's the rule. And then you give them permission to interact with you, follow you home, do other things that you probably don't want them to do. And so that's where I tell researchers, you have to be careful. It's very much like ghost hunters. I know, when I started really even deep into the research, I started seeing these similarities between supernatural, ghost hunters, Bigfoot, Dogman, UFO, and you had these common threads, and one of these common threads was the phenomenon will follow you home. And Bigfoot research, Dogman, ghost hunters, people that go look for UFOs, that sort of thing. It seems to all, when you actively seek, you give that permission to follow you home and kind of attach to you. And in my worldview, and it works for me. It's taken prayer and what is called rebuking, or where you kind of break that permission of that creature to have that interaction. Now the problem is there's consequences to your actions, and it's kind of like you break the law. You may not have meant to break the law, but you broke the law. There's going to be consequences. You may be forgiven, but there may be a consequence. And I think in this research, even if you are able to sever that permission for them to follow you home and personally interact, they still have this ability to get in close proximity to you and do other things around you. And that's kind of what I experience now, is that even though they may not approach me very closely, I'm going to, when I go into the woods, I know what they do and I know what they sound like, so I can hear them walking, I can hear them making noises, that sort of thing. That they may do something on the periphery. It's like I've got a circle around me where they can't interact with me, but outside that circle, they'll do stuff. And so that's kind of where my research is at now.
Now, with that being said, has there ever been like a time where you yourself felt almost as if, I wouldn't say like you were almost attacked, but you felt like there was a almost to be a presence where you could have been harmed? Or is that like something that you feel on all the time, or a measure, which is why you probably do the prayer before you go out into the bush yourself to research?
The second encounter I had, the one where I made eye contact, that one was one I felt like at any moment that Dogman could jump off the tree and charge me. Now, as part of the story, I didn't tell the whole story. As I'm looking at this thing, I'm trying to film it with my camera, and I finally, and during all this, I have my gun with me. I have a 40 caliber semi-automatic, and I didn't have one around in the chamber, and I thought to myself, I better chamber around. So I pull the gun out and I chamber around, and I let it snap back pretty loud. And when I did, the dog man took his ears just like a dog, and the ears focused right at the sound, and it looked directly at me. I mean, in other words, I got its full attention. And at that moment, I was extremely scared. I mean, I was actually running scenarios through my head. All right, if he jumps off and starts running, just a deep breath and unload center mass, and I'm breaching, I'm trying to figure out where's my knife in case this doesn't work. And then if he's on the ground, and there was about a 10 to 15 second period when it focused on me that I thought it was coming off the tree. I thought, I've done it now. He's going to charge me. But he didn't. Thank God he didn't. So yeah, that was a moment where I felt very threatened. And there's been other times when I've been in the woods when I've felt very uncomfortable. And I've actually started praying at those moments, God protect me, if there's anything around me, please protect me, help me get out of this situation. Because there's this, it's just, you get that sense that, you're in danger, or there's something close that, it means you harm and it's time to leave. So, but I have felt that. I can't say that's Dogman or Bigfoot or anything else, but I think anybody that's ever been in the woods has felt that feeling. It's just now that I've done the research and I know what could it possibly be, I think you have a greater understanding when you get these feelings, what could be causing it. You know what I'm saying? It's not
Right.
Your average hunter says, every now and then I'm out in the woods and I just get a weird feeling, and I just left that area of the woods. I didn't feel right, but doesn't have a clue why. And when I go in the woods and I don't feel right, I kind of know why. I know what's lurking that I can't see that's probably causing those feelings.
That's a good basis of it too. It's a great point of perspective on it. Not a lot of people know, and and the woods are terrifying to begin with. And when you're all alone, you're in a very tough spot, so you don't know what's out there. You do know, but you don't know what you're going to encounter. And I guess you could say for the field of research that it's practically up there, that you never may know. Now, going back to the discussion of the UFO thing with the phenomenon with Dogman. Now, what is your take? Because I've read some stories, and one of the stories was as close as recently upstate New York by me, which featured a series of flashing lights, which resulted in a near-fatal Dogman attack. Luckily, there was only a couple injuries. You've probably heard of it. Where there was this case of seeing a mysterious set of flashing lights that were spotted before the encounter. What is your take on the flashing light phenomenon?
That's a good question. I mean, could that be a UFO? I mean, I'm just going to throw some things out there. Could that be a UFO landing and they're getting off the UFO? Could that be an opening in a dimensional opening, a portal? Could these things be, completely, could their manifestation be some sort of supernatural manifestation, and there's some, whatever they are to start with are these glowing things, and then they manifest in our dimension as these creatures. I mean, those are three possibilities. I mean, the Shelley Rockwell Martin case, that was done on Paranormal Witness, and their encounters started with the globes of light in the woods. So that's not the only thing. You know, and I hate to keep going back to Bigfoot, but I know with Bigfoot, there's been more cases where people have either seen them on the UFOs, seen them get off the UFOs, or seen a Bigfoot with a gray alien. There's been a lot less cases. I've only heard of a couple that people that kind of associate, like, I saw a UFO, went off into the woods, and then a dogman showed up. I mean, that's usually the relationship is there's a UFO sighting, and then later they see a dogman, and it's just kind of an odd coincidence that the two happen, in the same area, and usually, within, they see the UFO, 30 minutes later, the dogman shows up. Sounded kind of like with your lights. So, this is one of those things that need more research. The lights show up, and then the dogman show up, and in that case, there's an attack. So, like I said, there's several possibilities. It's all open to research and, possibilities of just several different things.
And that's interesting, too, because I've been more curious on the flashing light phenomenon, and I've thought to myself, too, maybe this is an opening to that unknown state, that the other dimensions, of course, and whatnot. But it's hard to say. It's hard to actually specify because there's just so much of it, and it's hard to identify, I guess you could say, especially in this line of work, because it could be anything, like you've mentioned, with Sasquatch, aliens, and whatnot. We don't know for sure. And even for all we know, it could just be a phenomenon that coincidentally is not related to Dogman, and it just happens to be coincidental, but I'll take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah. I mean, it's an area where you need more data.
Exactly.
I mean, seriously, you need more data. There needs to be more reports, and you need to be able to, compare your data. And unfortunately, what we have, maybe 2 or 3, reports, and so it's not as, I'm saying, there's not as many Bigfoot as. With the Bigfoot, there's more reports. There's more data. With the Bigfoot, the reports come from both sides of the aisle. UFO people report it, and Bigfoot people report it. So you can, with the Dogman, it's been a whole lot less. And I think as the popularity of the phenomenon grows, as more people are open to tell their stories, I think we'll get more of this data that we need to say, is this, like you said, is it more than coincidence? In other words, do we have 1,000 reports and, 200 of these lights show up and then the Dogman? Well, then you've got some correlation.
Indeed. Well, Scott, we're almost close to the hour mark, so before, we start wrapping things up, I want to talk to you about a couple other things. One of the things being, do you have a favorite encounter either from you that you've witnessed, or perhaps a favorite story that stands out to you in reference to the research you do? Like, is there one story that stands out to you that's stuck with you even to this day, that's fascinated you completely?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the Shelley Rockman Martin story of the encounter that she had, and that's because, I'm kind of biased, but I posted pictures of my dog, the Dogman, and she looked at the video and the pictures, and she basically said, that's the closest I've seen to the Dogman that, harassed us for the 24-hour period. So I guess that's my favorite story because she actually, helped corroborate my video and saying that's pretty much the Dogman that we saw. And of course, there was more than one, and that's an intriguing story and a scary story, and it has some interesting, ins and outs because, she was not, she was a person that didn't like guns, so she made her husband in a rural area keep the guns in the garage. And these things show up, and they're in the house. The guns are in the garage, and the Dogman are out, outside. The husband sneaks outside, and he tries to go and, get some guns from the car. I think they were in the car in the garage or something. And there's a street light. And a very interesting thing that happened during this encounter is it was a motion type street light, and when he would move, the street light would come on. There was Dogman were very close to him, but they would not step into the light. I think that's very telling and very interesting that they wouldn't come out in the light. So, and the fact that he finally had to go back in the house, he couldn't get the guns, and these creatures, they never came into the house. They stayed on the outside of the house. They scared them to death. They walked on the porch. They scratched on the side of the walls. They stood outside and stared up at the window at them, but they never came in. I think it's common sense. If you got this 8-foot creature that looks like a werewolf and there's multiple ones of them, there's no reason why they couldn't break a window out and go slaughter this family. But they didn't. It's like they couldn't. And so I find that whole story and the different little things that happen, I think, are very telling. And it's a good case study, because you see, them not coming into the light. What's that all about? They start out with lights, with orbs or lights in the woods. There's some sort of barrier or rule that says they can't go in that house. Why not? Every monster movie I've ever seen, a locked door never stopped anything, right? So why would these creatures, this is the real world, this is not a movie, there's nothing to stop them from busting through the wall or a window, but they don't. And then, they harass this family for 24 hours or so, and then that's it, they're gone. So that's my favorite story, I guess.
That's a pretty good story, too, and there's no question how terrifying it must be, which, now, because we kind of basically emphasized on the whole viewpoint of flesh and blood and supernatural and where we stand with it, I want to ask you this now, alluding to that question I said about, the favorite encounter, and you mentioned the story itself. Do you personally believe that what they do in those type of situations is a test on us as humanity to see what we would do, or do you think that's just them basically saying, we could get you if we truly want to, but we're not going to, type scenario? So basically, do you think that this is like a test on their own behalf of seeing how we as humans would react to such a terrifying presence, or do you think that this is a more in-depth thing that we don't have the answer to why they do this type of stuff?
I think it's more in depth. I think there may be multiple. In other words, an encounter may have more than just one motive or one goal for these things. It may be to scare. It may be to test us. It may be to test their boundaries. We don't know what force or what. My question has always been, what's enforcing the rule? That's the scary part. If the Dogman won't approach the house and break a window, okay, what is that force that's saying you can't do that? And if you try to do it, I'll stop you, and by some horrible mean. Obviously the Dogman can't or won't do it for some reason. And so, to me, that's they could be actually testing their limits. In other words, how far can we go? Can we break the rules this time? Are we being monitored, and are the rules enforced? So I think that's I think these encounters could be multifold, and plus just the general fear. I think evil feeds off of fear, and sometimes I think some of it's just to scare the bejesus out of people, and to harass them, and to be and to do those sort of things that scare people and terrify people, just for the fact that that's what they do. I hate to say it, but that's what they do.
I agree. Well, Scott, practically, I would love to have you do another interview in the future, definitely. I love your viewpoints. I love your discoveries on things. And truly, I really, as someone who is new to the field, I really praise your work. I love what you do, man. And I know it's a scary thing. And for what you've done in research, and for the past 5 years since that infamous video, there's been a lot of questions, a lot of people who've asked about how you operate with the Dogman realm, and hopefully this is knowledgeable to those who've asked, and hopefully this helps them, because this is not the first rodeo. This could be, we'll have a second rodeo, a third, a fourth, and who knows how long we'll take these rodeos too. So Scott, before we do conclude, I do want to ask you, do you have any closing words that you would like to give to the audience, or any piece of advice for anybody out there with the Dogman research?
Sure. Well, if you're not into Dogman research and you're wanting to get into it, don't go play golf, go fish, because this will it can consume you, and it can open you up to things that you may not want to open yourself up to. I mean, and I'm just being honest. But if you're just bound and determined, I think I think common sense. Don't go alone. Realize that I don't recommend it, but if you seek these things out, you're going to open yourself up to things. There's the old law of unintended consequences. So you could open yourself up to things you don't want to. I mean, I've done it, and I did it out of ignorance. So just be aware. I mean, as for research tools, I recommend the back trail camera. I mean, that's how I've gotten all my footage, basically, is what's lurking behind you. And so perfect the GoPro camera nowadays is the thing. I still use the handy cam, but GoPro, some of the GoPros, that's the way to go. But all the action's happening behind you. And and the other thing, of course, I don't recommend it, but there would be trying to collect hair and stuff, for DNA, and it's kind of, I'm kind of, even though I was part of the Sasquatch genome study, it was such a, you can't force science to look at anything you have. It doesn't matter. I mean, I even heard one guy one time, a forestry guy, say, if you drug the body and laid it at my feet, I would step over it and ignore it. I mean, so you can't convince somebody with that attitude. So, I mean, if you get into this, it's more of a thing for self-discovery. In other words, like I really started all my research to prove to myself. It was my personal thing, really. What did I see? What was going on? And what are these things? Now, of course, I've answered that question for myself. Other people, unfortunately, I say unfortunately or fortunately, are going to have to answer that question. That's what I think what they're seeking. What is a Dogman? And what's its purpose here? What is it doing? Because if you're going to try to, my advice, if you're going to try to prove it, you're wasting your time to prove it to other people. The only person you can really prove it to is yourself. So my advice is be careful. If you're going to do the research, go with a partner. Take advantage of some of the back trail camera, and for goodness sakes, pray up before you go.
The words of truth right there, ladies and gentlemen, and please understand that, if Scott himself, who has had the most craziest encounters and all that, understand that Scott ain't playing when he says that. That is words of wisdom, and every researcher out there has taken that too as words of wisdom as well. It's important too. Scott, I've had the greatest hour of my life talking to you. I mean, you're a very knowledgeable person. I love hearing your viewpoints on everything, and I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I do. And I would love to have you come on again, possibly for a future episode, of course, most definitely.
Sure, I'd be glad to come back.
Absolutely. Before we do go, though, would you like to go ahead and plug in any type of recommendations to where they can reach you at, or any of blogs you got so they can take a look? I'll put them in the links on YouTube in the description, but of course, feel free to showcase what you would like to have viewers take a look at after the show's over.
My latest book out is called The Nephilim Among Us, and I'll give you the link, but if they actually just Google the Nephilim Among Us, it should come up to my book. That book is I just walk the reader through, how I came to the conclusions of what Bigfoot, Dogman, and all these other creatures are through, my experience, through my research, and through the scientific study of the DNA. And so that's my most recent book that kind of would get the reader caught up to where I started and where I'm at now. I have a blog, of course, a Dogman blog called Dogman, The Monsters Are Real, and they can also go there. Of course, you can find my YouTube channel under Scott Carpenter. And like I said, if you Google my name, I guess it's a good thing and a curse that I'll come up. If you Google Scott Carpenter Bigfoot or Scott Carpenter Dogman, you'll find all kinds of good stuff. So I'm out there. It's not as far as plugging, it's not hard to do.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, Scott, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. And I will keep in contact with you, my friend. You enjoy the rest of your night.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, bud. You take care now.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.